Holy Gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ according to Luke.
Glory to you, Lord Christ.
Jesus said to the Pharisees, "There was a rich man who was dressed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. At his gate lay a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who longed to satisfy his hunger with what fell from the rich man's table. Even the dogs would come and lick his sores. The poor man died and was carried away by the angels to be with Abraham. The rich man also died and was buried. In Hades, where he was being tormented, he looked up and saw Abraham far away with Lazarus by his side. He called out, 'Father Abraham, have mercy on me, and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in the cool water and cool my tongue, for I'm in agony in these flames.' But Abraham said, 'Child, remember that during your lifetime you received good things, and Lazarus, in like manner, evil things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in agony. Besides all this, between you and us a great chasm has been fixed, so that those who might want to pass from here to you cannot do so, and no one can cross from there to us.' He said, 'Then, Father, I beg you to send him to my father's house, for I have 5 brothers, that he may warn them, so that they will not also come to this place of torment.' Abraham replied, 'They have Moses and the prophets. They should listen to them.' He said, 'No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent.' He said to him, 'If they do not listen to Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced, even if someone rises from the dead.'" The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
I sat with the young people at our Wednesday morning Bible study this past week, waiting to begin my explanation of this passage that we hear today from Luke. We listened to it twice, read through by 2 different teenagers. Before I could jump in, though, I had to pause for a moment because I'd just taken a bite of my breakfast and it was a little dry. And I mentioned that dryness to the group since they were staring at me wondering what was taking me so long to get started. And in that moment, I was convicted once again of my Dives lifestyle. Dives is the name traditionally given to the rich man in the parable. There I sat. I happened to have on a purple shirt that day, which even added to the situation. There I sat in that restaurant with a biscuit the size of my face and coffee that would come. All I had to do was wiggle 2 fingers and more coffee would come and more coffee would come and more coffee would come. After years of delicious breakfast sandwiches at this restaurant, and having twice heard the passage about the rich man and Lazarus, and all I could do was complain about the dryness of my breakfast sandwich. Meanwhile, 1 in 9 people went hungry that day, as they will today. The problem with such immense inequality is that we can end up simply feeling helpless. We throw our hands up in frustration in recognition of the problem, yet we go right back to our biscuits or our steaks or our tuna tartare, complaining about how poorly it was prepared. And 1 in 9 people will go hungry while we're doing so. What's the point of caring then when what we can do accomplishes so little? It seems, though, that the rich man, Dives, never even got to that point in his own mind. He lived and died completely oblivious to the needs of those around him, especially Lazarus, who longed to lick up the crumbs under his table. And then, in the afterlife, he remains blind to the needs of anyone but himself. He sees Lazarus resting in the bosom of Abraham, and he asks Abraham to send Lazarus to bring but a drip of water to him to cool his tongue. And then when Abraham says, that ain't going to happen, Dives, then he says, well, if you won't send him to bring me some water, then send him to my family so that he can warn them about the fate that awaits them. It's a farcical scene in which Dives, tormented in the flames, still orders Lazarus around. He still thinks that he's in charge, or should be. Who could possibly actually be that self-centered, that obtuse, that egomaniacal? Is it that far-fetched, really? We may not be able to end world hunger, but we can certainly choose not to be deaf to the cries of the hungry. The same goes with all of the inequalities of the world. We may not be able to eradicate them, but we have a duty to be aware of them and to strive in what ways we can to remedy them. Many of you have likely seen the man who has been living along this section of Main Street for the last several months. He's always covered in layer upon layer of clothing, with a blanket tied around his shoulders, a backpack on his back, standing in dangerous places like the middle of the road, staring off into the distance. I had seen him around since he started living in the neighborhood. I had noticed him bedding down in the lot that once was the gas station at the corner of Lexington and Main. I had seen him sleeping on the sidewalk in the glaring heat of summer, all of his layers still intact. I called the police once when I was worried about the possibility of him experiencing heat stroke, but they couldn't do anything for them. He had refused their help multiple times. Here at our doorstep, literally, lives a man truly on the fringes. And the most I ever did in all of those weeks was to call the police once while I was taking my children to a birthday party. Luckily, not everyone else was as much of a Dives as was I. I began to notice him with takeout containers of food. And then one parishioner asked me about him. She knew his name, Marquise. She had taken him food on several occasions and had spoken with him, and she wanted to know more of his story, and so she came to me, I'm assuming, because she knew that her minister, of all people, would know something about this man in such obvious need. But I didn't. And I was mortified. My bubble of new church buildings and of comfortable furniture and solemn liturgies and beautiful living in general had insulated me from the very world that this faith of ours intended for me to engage. Convicted and embarrassed, I began looking for him. I now know his name too. And I stop and I chat regularly. Marquise has refused my help too, but not my visits, and not the little gifts of food and water and clothing that my son Parker and I sometimes take to him. He's got a great smile. He'll tell you all about the gargoyle in his backpack. And yes, there really is a gargoyle in his backpack. All the while, smiling in an easy way, I'm all right, yeah, I'm all right. I see food in his hands often now. A local business has told him that he can sleep behind their building. Last week I was talking with him when another car pulled up behind me, and Marquise was obviously expecting this car. They were bringing him some food for dinner that night. And inside the car, the faces of the two people lit up when they saw Marquise, and his lit up when he saw them, and they handed him the food out of the car window, and the driver in this car yelled out, "I love you, Marquise." What a good thing for him to hear. This couple in their late 60s, white, Marquise in his early 40s, and black. I love you, Marquise. I told the group about him at Bible study, and one young person said, "Oh yeah, Marquise, I've talked with him." "Oh yeah, Marquise, I've talked with him." He didn't have to be guilted into doing the right thing. He simply was. No longer can we live separate from those around us. Our lives and theirs are intertwined. Their well-being and ours are inseparable. We can't reasonably expect someone to accept our help if they don't know who we are. We, the privileged, and we are incredibly privileged, 1 in 9 people will be hungry today. Will you? We, the privileged, are called to be something other than comfortable. We're called to strive for the justice and peace We're called to strive for justice and peace among all people and to respect the dignity of every human being. And we can't respect the dignity of every human being if we are oblivious to their existence. Christ, who shared so completely with our humanity, made our humanity all the more perfect through his sharing. On a much smaller scale, our own sharing in the plight of the humanity of another makes us more truly who God has created and redeemed us to be. It was true for me with Marquise that when I knew him and his humanity, I became more fully human myself. The great Anglican poet and divine John Donne famously wrote, "No man is an island entire of itself. Any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind." Be involved in humankind, not merely an observer, or worse yet, unobservant. Share what you have with others. Share yourself with others, and allow another to share with you. Be involved in humankind, and be fully human yourself.